Join the New Zealand Alpine Club today and be a part of New Zealand's proud mountain community, supporting adventure since 1891. Membership benefits include discounts at our extensive network of huts nationwide, a range of courses and learning opportunities for aspiring climbers, led by the country's best instructors, a subscription to The Climber, New Zealand's only magazine devoted to climbing, as well as the New Zealand Alpine Journal. Travel insurance options allowing for climbing and other adventure activities not covered by standard policies. Perfect for your next adventure abroad. Plus, New Zealand Alpine Club membership also grants a variety of discounts at ski fields, climbing walls, and outdoor retailers nationwide. Leadership and community for all who enjoy and wish to protect our magnificent crags and mountain spaces. The New Zealand Alpine Club, a voice for New Zealand's mountain lovers. Join us today. For more information, visit alpineclub.org.nz.
The much anticipated 8th edition of the Arthur's Pass Guidebook is now available to buy. Head over to alpineclub.org.nz to get your copy and start planning some adventures. This is your last chance to buy the Avalanche Awareness in the New Zealand Backcountry and Backcountry Ski Touring Guidebook at the special price of $56 for both. This offer ends at midnight tonight, so make sure you don't miss out. In conjunction with tonight's virtual club night, we have another special book offer for you. Buy the award-winning Auraki Tauportini Guidebook for $45 and save $25 compared to the usual RRP. This offer ends at midnight on Thursday the 14th of May. Next week's virtual club night will be a unique opportunity to watch the incredible film Pacific Lines, starring climbing sensation Angie Scarth Johnson. After smashing climbing records around the world, Angie looks for her next challenge. She journeys to the Pacific island of Ewa with her family and friend Lee Cozzi to explore her own ancestry and search for a classic line on the wild frontier of rock climbing development. It's a story of cultural identity and rock climbing exploration as we follow Angie, one of Australia's top rock climbers, on an adventure to a remote and rugged island in the South Pacific. Angie will be joining us live on the night for an interview and to answer any of your questions following the film. Be sure to stick around for the film trailer after tonight's talk.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, a very happy day to be in New Zealand because we've gained finally some view of the future without lockdown and perhaps a return to the mountains. Thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to be hosting Graham Zimmerman for this evening's virtual club night. And as in the past few weeks, we'll be kicking off with some NZAC announcements before introducing tonight's speaker and getting on with it. Now, in terms of the club's announcements for this week, it will be probably news to no one that we've had some clarity today on what level 2 means with respect to the COVID-19 situation. And so with that government advice, it's a good opportunity to remind you about the Mountain Safety Council's website, covid19outdoors.nz. That's covid19outdoors.nz, which includes information and advice about what activities are permissible under our current alert level, which is, of course, still level 3, but will be updated, if it hasn't been already, to clarify the sorts of activities that we might be able to resume if and when we reach alert level 2, hopefully next week, but of course there's no confirmation of that as yet. Now, you will remember from last week that the NZAC has been offering a special on books that were related to last week's talk from Anna Keeling. So that is a combined purchase of Avalanche Awareness in the New Zealand Backcountry and also the Backcountry Ski Touring Guidebook. Both of those are still available for the reduced combined price of $56 all up, so that's about $30 off. and you can head online to alpineclub.org.nz to buy them, but that expires today, in fact, at midnight. So that's the Combined Avalanche Awareness and Backcountry Skiing Guidebooks on sale at the Alpine Club website, but only until tonight. This week's book offer, inspired by the talk tonight, is the Aoraki Taiputini Guidebook, which is Banff Film and Book Festival champion for guidebooks in the last year. So well done, Rob Frost, the editor of that. And for this week, you can get that book at the special price of $45, which is a saving of $25 on the recommended retail price. And this is a 1 week only offer, again, at the alpineclub.org.nz website, where you'll find all the usual offerings now being shipped out under Alert Level 3. And I can attest to the prompt delivery of my avalanche and skiing books that I ordered last week. They came through very quickly, thanks to Margaret and the team. And a really good opportunity, of course, to financially support the Alpine Club, which, like many organisations around the country, is suffering with a loss of revenue from activities and huts and all those sorts of things. So really, you can show your support for the Alpine Club by getting on board with some of these excellent book offerings. And now you'll have seen as well, if you've joined us with the introductory video, that we have a special virtual club night next week. We'll be screening the film Pacific Lines live on the night, followed by a Q&A with Angie Scarth Johnson. She's the climber and the star of the film. Pacific Lines follows her travelling to Tonga to establish some new routes, and we'll learn about some of her family history over there as well. The film isn't available online, so don't go hunting YouTube and Vimeo, hoping to cut ahead of that. And as with all our virtual club nights, it's of course a free event, open to anyone. So do make sure that's in your calendar next Thursday at 8 p.m. New Zealand time. And we will be playing the film trailer for that at the end of tonight's virtual club night. So thank you very much again for joining us. My name is Jazz Morris, based here in Christchurch. And broadcasting out to the NZAC community for what is the fourth, I believe, virtual club night in a row. This week we've started a little bit earlier than normal because Graham Zimmerman is over in the US, and you'll appreciate it's God knows what o'clock over there, and he's kindly staying up late for us tonight. So just to introduce Graham, just coming onto your screen now. And we thought we'd start with some kind of quick fire questions to get to know you, Graham, before we start the talk.
All right.
Yeah. So,
hi everybody. I'm Graham.
Graham, where are you from originally?
So Jazz, I was born in Wellington. But as you might gather from my accent, I moved away from New Zealand when I was 4 or 5 years old and grew up in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And moved back to New Zealand when I was 18, lived there for quite a while. And then these days I live in Bend, Oregon. So kind of bouncing back and forth.
All right. Another Wellington lad. I'm proud to hear that. My home as well, originally speaking, before making the move south. And so you're currently in Bend. So that's near Smith Rock, the home of sport climbing in North America.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So does that mean you're a sport climber, or are you trade climbing by preference?
So I'm pretty well an alpinist, but sport climbing is great training, and a big part of training is working on your weaknesses. And as a big heavy guy who spends a lot of time in the hills trying to hang on to small holds is hard. So I spend a lot of time out there, getting my ass kicked, which is great.
That's my recollection of Smith too. Glad to hear it.
Small holds, intricate sequences. It's great.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. So you said you're an alpinist. I guess that's going to mean you're in the winter climbing camp, or a summer climbing your thing as well. It's interesting, and I'll get into this kind of at the start of the presentation in more in depth. But climbing for me is in many ways taking all of these different skills that we utilize in climbing and then applying them to these big objectives. So whether when I was younger, I lived in Yosemite and spent a lot of time climbing on El Cap and things like that. I've also spent a lot of time living in the Canadian Rockies.
And so, it's, these are all different disciplines within climbing. And one of the great things about climbing is we really get to choose how we get at it and what we want to do. But for me, I really love all of it. Even bouldering is a little harder to apply to alpine climbing, but even bouldering I really enjoy. But the alpine is, for me, the most inspiring place to go utilize these skill sets to try to hack our way up big hills in the Great Ranges.
Cool. Do you carry skis very often? Are you into ski mode?
Yeah. Skiing is amazing training. I don't, it's interesting. I really kind of pick and choose where I like take risk, if you will. So I don't push it very hard with skiing. But I really, really love it. And I'm fortunate to live in a place where we have pretty good access, and we also have a pretty stable snowpack. So I do get out quite a bit.
Cool. A couple of controversial questions for you in a row. Beer or wine is the first one.
So I'm kind of, I'm fairly glutarded these days. So I tend to drink more wine, but the gluten-free beer is getting better. So I
was going to say you're in one of the beer capitals of the world. That's a surprise. But
I know. Yeah.
I guess there's wine a little further north up in Washington State too, huh?
I mean, we have no lack of libations here. It's just, I guess my answer to beer or wine should probably just be tequila.
Another one. Are you of the slow and heavy persuasion of climbing, or fast and light, shivering and cold burning?
This is really interesting. I think that I would put myself in the middle somewhere, because I'm a strong believer that you need to bring enough to make sure that you can get yourself out of sticky situations. Because when it comes down to it, we would like to survive these things. But you don't want to carry so much that you're not having a good time. And I feel like in my past, kind of looking at my kind of influences, you have like the kind of deep past where it was like big siege style expedition climbing. And then that kind of transformed into this super ultra light, the kind of, the French like night naked scene and all of that. And I feel like I try to borrow from both camps and find the best tools for me. So while my backpack may not be super, super light, it's pretty dang light. Just trying to be reasonable.
Cool. Good answer. I mean, that middle ground's probably the ideal. It's just probably everyone has different ideas of what the middle ground is.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't want to carry too much.
No, that's, amen. And one thing you look for in a climbing partner, because you'll have had a lot of your long expeditions. What do you look for?
Ooh, I have an answer that I really like for this one, which is I'm looking for somebody who is willing to fail. And I think that the types of objectives that I really want to try are the types of things that we're not just going to do first try every time. And that's going to require, failing, or at least not being successful on the climb. Failure. If you come up safe, you didn't fail. But if you bail because conditions weren't right, you didn't have the beta quite right or whatever, and then you have to kind of like treat these as an iterative process. That means you're getting closer to like the hardest thing that you're able to do, and that's a really hard thing to find in a climbing partner. Somebody who's willing to like kind of try again in order to do these big hard things. And we're about to talk about a trip where I spent like 6 months on a glacier trying it. And I guess, should I give it away? Do we know that? And maybe we made it to the top.
Who knows? I guess we'll find out. So it's a good segue, actually. So we'll let you get into your talk in just a moment, but I just want to remind the audience, or let them know, in fact, that if they're watching us through Facebook or whatever means, they can leave us comments. We'll be picking, or questions, I should say, and we'll be picking those up throughout the talk. And we'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end. So people can start asking those now, or just as things come up in the chat, and then we'll have a bit of Q&A in the end. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right.
Do your worst with the questions.
Cheers, Graham.
but I'll try to answer them all. So, before we even get to them, how about that?
Yeah, well, it's always possible. We'll let you take it away.
All right, cool. I'm going to jump onto the screen share here, and here we go. Okay, so here we are looking at a small tent on a glacier in a remote part of the Alaska range. And this right here is what inspires me about climbing. This is what I really work towards. A simple experience with somebody who I really enjoy, and something that is big and hard and has never been climbed before. This is this peak in the backyard, or in the background here, is Mount Lawrence in Alaska, and so we have thank you. I think I just got a note that we were not in the proper mode there. All right, cool. Does that look better? Excellent. Okay. So, and this is a process that really requires a lot more than just the climbing. It requires a lot of adventure, a lot of approach, a lot of planning, a lot of logistics, and these are all things that I really get a kick out of. This is to get into that base camp that we were looking at before. It took us flying into a new landing strip in a new part of the range, and then skiing for 2 days to get there. And at that point, we really moved into the technical climbing component. And then, of course, there is that technical climbing component, which is so cool. Just such a badass thing to do. This is on another trip to Alaska. This one's in the Wrangell St. Elias range on the west face of Salino Peak. So what is alpinism? Many of you know, but I think it's always kind of like we get to define this for ourselves. So I may as well say how I define it for myself. And for me, kind of like we talked about earlier, it's combining steep ice climbing, like waterfall ice climbing here, steep rock climbing, generally traditional, like we have here. This is on the left in the Canadian Rockies, on the right. This is at Trout Creek near where I live. We have the kind of big wall component, being able to deal with those systems of aid climbing and all that. This is heading up towards the Boot Flake on a Nose in a Day mission a bunch of years ago. And then mixed climbing as well, which is, of course, kind of combining rock climbing and ice climbing during the wintertime with ice tools. And we put these things together, and we take them from places like this. This is once again in Canadian Rockies on like a 1 or 2 pitch ice climb. And we take them to places like this. This is on the second day of a route at Rogers Pass up in Canada. So we were able to take these skills that we have learned at the crags, at the ice falls, and go apply them to the big hills. This is in the Serratori group in Patagonia in the Chaltén Massif, and as we do this, it creates some pretty amazing experiences, and this, we get to sleep in some very cool places. This is our high bivvy on a new route we did on K6 West in the Pakistani Karakoram. But the thing that really keeps me coming back, the thing that really gets me fired up about mountain climbing, is the partnership. And it's interesting. Like, I think that soloing is interesting. And I'm not going to get into what do I think of the movie or whatever. But like, for me, I really like being in the mountains with people who I really enjoy, people who I trust, people who know me really well. And climbing has been the source of some of my strongest relationships, and it's one of the biggest things that I appreciate about it. And it's not just with climbing partners. I put this photo in. This is us walking out of the Nangma Valley in Pakistan, and that's Steve Swenson on the left, who you'll hear a lot about, who's a climbing partner of mine, who's in his mid 60s, and just pretty unusual. But he's been a mentor in many ways. Far beyond climbing. And then to his right there is our buddy Rasul, who's also in his 60s, in his later 60s. And Rasul lives in a small town way up in the mountains called Hushay in Pakistan. And Rasul is a dear friend of Steve's. They've been hanging out since the early 1980s, and he's since become a dear friend of mine. I'm like putting his daughter through college right now, and so that's really what drives me to climb. Now, we talked about this a little bit before, but why do you have some dude with a West Coast Yankee accent talking on the New Zealand Alpine Club channel? And I'm going to try to explain myself. So I was born in New Zealand, and I think in total at this point I've probably lived there like just under 10 years between when I was little and then when I moved back for university and studied geography and glaciology. And for me, it's been very foundational in many ways in my kind of how I get at the world and how I see what's going on around me. But the biggest component that I think is worth talking about right now is climbing. And when I was 18 years old, I just finished up high school, and I'd kind of discovered climbing. I knew it was something I wanted to do, and I was moving back to New Zealand to study glaciers, and I was moving back to New Zealand in order to cut my teeth in alpinism. And I spent the next 3 or 4 years doing precisely that. And, the training ground that the Southern Alps, at least, Southern Alps for me in particular, provided was incredible for building a foundation for climbing in the big mountains of the world. We have all these components of very real ice climbing, very real mixed climbing. These gigantic features. That first one was White Dream on the south face of Cook, on the south face of the Low Peak. This is the direct on the, I guess is at the east or the southeast face of Sefton, kind of right there above Mount Cook Village. This is up on the incredible south face of Hicks, which when I first moved there, it was like this dream of a climb, and then I ended up going up there with a partner, and we linked up the first half of the new gun barrels into Yankee Kiwi Couloir, and it was just like so good. I have honestly never experienced ice climbing in the mountains quite like this, really anywhere in the world other than New Zealand. And it's and these routes require a lot, like a very diverse skill set, and they require a lot of patience. You don't always get them right the first time. This is Nosferatu on the the south face of Vampire Peak, southeast face of Vampire Peak. I'm getting a little bit of these cardinal directions a little bit wrong. Sorry, this is just bad memory. They say that an important part of being a strong alpinist is having a bad memory, and I feel like I definitely fit that bill. But this one also, like, part of this fell down or something before or after we were up there. But these aren't straightforward routes. Many places you go, like if you go somewhere like the Chaltén Massif, like the climbing is amazing, but the rock is pretty dang good. You really kind of know where you're going. You can get very good beta. When we went and did this, the rock was miserable. The ice was exceptionally steep, and we really had no idea where we were going besides just kind of a line in the guidebook. And I think, the old Alan, I think, is it Al Urin guidebook? They had these like very, very short descriptions. It would be like, go up, it's going to be really steep, which was awesome. But really left a lot of room for adventure. I'm actually very excited to see the new guidebook as well. I haven't seen it. I hear it's quite good. And then this is kind of special. This is by far the smallest feature of any of these things that I've shown. This is like a 4-pitch thing up on the, I guess on the fronds, but this is the first new route that I ever opened, which felt like a really big deal. And you can see there I was pretty flexible back then. So for me, New Zealand is a place that has been ultra foundational. I thought I might as well throw some rock climbing in there as well, because I did actually learn a lot about rock climbing while I was there, and then over in Australia as well. And I will say that I finally made a trip into the Darrens a few years ago and got to climb a few routes in there during the summertime. And man, the rock climbing in there is amazing. But I thought I'd kind of finish up the New Zealand, we're chatting about New Zealand, showing this photo, which a lot of you will recognize. This is looking over towards Mount Tasman. We're kind of looking at the upper part of the Balfour face there. And I think that's right, the Balfour or the Hidden. Feel free to correct me. In the Q&A, you can also just tell me if I'm wrong. Be as mean as you like, it's fine. But, this is a photo that could be anywhere. And this could be in any of the big mountains. This could be in any of the big mountains of the world. And this is actually right down there in the middle of the Southern Alps of New Zealand. And I think that this photo really demonstrates that, this is a mountain range where you can train to climb on the biggest stuff in the world. You may not have quite as much altitude, quite as much relief, the portering process or any of that stuff. But the Southern Alps are an amazing training ground. And I consider them to be exceptionally foundational for all the climbing I've done since. So as we fast forward here, I'm going to start talking about Pakistan. And since I was younger, since I was first introduced to climbing, the Pakistani Karakoram is a place that's really fascinated me. And I spent a lot, when I finished up in school in New Zealand, I ended up moving back to the States, took trips to Kyrgyzstan, a whole bunch of trips to Alaska, a bunch of trips to Patagonia, some remote parts of Canada, kind of all over the place. But it was always kind of aimed at someday I want to go to Pakistan. I guess I went to Nepal in there as well. But as we talk about this place, it's really for me, given the rock quality, given how big the mountains are, given the fact there's not that much snow, it is kind of the perfect place to go climbing. And I first started trying to go to Pakistan in 2013, but was not able to go for a number of years because of some of the political stuff going on there, and it just honestly wasn't safe. But eventually in 2015, I started really being able to go on trips in earnest there, and it has not disappointed. And so we're gonna do a little bit of kind of geographical geekery here, because I'm gonna be talking to you about Pakistan, and I'm gonna be telling you that it's a place I think you should go. But before I do that, I really want to contextualize what that means. Pakistan is a very big place, and when I go to Pakistan, I fly to Islamabad. I might go to Rawalpindi or down to Jhelum or something like that, but I don't really travel very far outside of there. And then I take a flight up to Gilgit-Baltistan, or as it's referred to in this map, the northern areas. And those are the two places I go. And when I go there, I have never felt threatened. I've never felt unsafe, at least because of the people. I've always had an excellent cultural experience. And it's a place where I would take my grandmother if she was willing to go. And so, this is kind of what I'm talking about as I talk about Pakistan. And, there are parts of this map that you do not want to visit. And there are parts of this map that you absolutely do want to visit that I just haven't been to. But when I'm kind of referring to us as climbers, I just feel like it's kind of nice to have a caveat of this is what I'm talking about. And the other thing that's going on up there, and I'm not going to get into the details of this map, but it's just kind of show you how complex the whole Kashmir situation is. And I'm not going to get into what Kashmir is and how it all started and all that. You can, there's lots of reading you can do on that, and it's really fascinating. But basically, this is a very politically complex area with a past that involves a lot of conflicts, and those conflicts have resulted in a lot of closures. And those closures have meant that there are huge parts of this range with some very big mountains in them and some very impressive mountains that really we haven't been able to access. And as that conflict has subsided, some of those areas have started to open up, and that's been an amazing opportunity for me to go to some of these zones where there are stunning peaks where people have not really gone, or at least climbers have not really gone, and so we have these amazing objectives, and we have a lot of adventure, and some of these objectives are really big, which is pretty cool. So the kind of story of Link Sar, which is really what we're here to talk about, starts here. And this is a ways away from Link Sar, but in 2015 we went, and we were going to try to climb K6, and we were going to try to climb this thing, Changi Tower. And we had a great trip. We climbed a new route on K6 West, And we also climbed Changi Tower, which is a pretty rad peak, kind of a triangle tower-y kind of thing. It's kind of, I don't know, here are the numbers for those who's interested. We mostly climbed that right-hand skyline. And it was pretty bitchin'. It was a really, really good climb. And the thing that we could see from the top of Changi Tower's on the left, was this thing Link Sar. And Link Sar was something I'd heard of. I knew that Link Sar was one of the kind of great unclimbed 7,000 meter peaks. And I'd mostly heard about it being attempted from the Charkusa, which is on the other side of the mountain. But from Changi Tower, we were looking across and we were looking at Link Sar, and we could kind of see a way to go. And it looked really cool. It also looked very, very big. And for me, it was, it looked like something like maybe I should go try. It was kind of this new interesting idea that I didn't really know was available. But for one of my climbing partners, Steve Swenson, there were 3 of us on that climb on Changi Tower: Steve Swenson, myself, and my pal Scott Bennett. But Steve had actually been to try Link Sar before in 2001. There were 2 years when people were allowed over into the Condis Valley that the east face of Link Sar spills into. And the first trip was a team of Americans. It was like Brady Robinson, Jimmy Chin, Steph Davis, and somebody else. And then in 2001, another team of Americans went in to try Link Sar. And so Steve had been there and he had tried it. And he was looking over there going, oh, I can see a way. But instead of it being like the musings of somebody who's never been there, he was like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what I was looking for when I was there. Because in 2001, they had been unsuccessful. And this is a view of the east face of Link Sar. It's a very, very big, complex mountain. From the glacier at the bottom here, it's over 3,000 meters to the summit. Maybe like 3,600 meters. It's really big. And it's really interesting because this face goes so far down that you get down into like ibex pastures and all this. You have these big, all this terrain that's, you can see kind of in the middle of this frame. There's a lot of foreshortening going on up high, but you have these big grassy pastures above like steep cliff bands and stuff like that. It's kind of bananas just how much terrain there is to deal with. And the other thing that's wild about Link Sar is, so this is Google Earth imagery, kind of looking at a acute angle down here. You can see at the top left there, the Charkusa where it had been tried from before. But so as we look at these glaciers here, up and to the right, that glacier leads up to the Sea Allah. And the Sea Allah is one of the contested passes between Pakistan and India that they both keep armaments on. And that means that there is a supply caravan that runs up along the side of this glacier. And what that meant was that we were able to drive to base camp. And I love this photo just because it really, this is still, I don't know, probably 5 hours of driving away from our base camp. Maybe not quite that far, maybe 3. But you can just see like how cool this place is. I mean, the Karakoram is just so badass. And the fact that we were able to drive to base camp was pretty unique. Normally a place like this, you'd probably have like 4 days of walking with porters. Also funny in this photo is that I didn't actually notice this for a long time, but the guy in the lower right hand corner is kind of like scratching his crotch there. But most of us are fully distracted by the towers. Now on this trip, Steve and I went with my buddy Chris Wright, and Chris is a mountain guide. We were talking before about things that we look for in climbing partners, their willingness to fail. Chris is like dedicated to the art of alpinism. He's a great climber. He's very smart, and he's very willing to make good decisions out there and try again on things that are hard and are groundbreaking, at least for us. And so he was a great person for us to go with on this trip because there were just no guarantees. And so we got in, we went, this is in 2017. We got the permits. It was this huge fiasco to get the permits. But we eventually got them, and we get in there and we go and we try Link Sar, and we start walking across this glacier. We climb all those kind of rock bluffs up to these meadows, and we go up and we establish an advanced base camp up here. And that advanced base camp was very small. It's just a couple of small tents and a kind of pile of food. And this photo right here demonstrates really well, I think, why we kind of got straight into Link Sar. Traditionally speaking, on a 7,000 meter peak, we would go find something that's 6,000 meters and like easy and go climb that. And that's how we had to acclimatize. And then we'd go rage on the 7,000 meter thing and try to do it in that kind of, not too like fast and not too light kind of mode. But in the case of this valley, this is one of the deepest valleys in the Karakoram. It's also one of the steepest valleys in the Karakoram. You can really see that like, getting up high in this valley is super challenging. And it was since it was going to take us so much effort to get up high, we decided that we would just start on Link Sar, just go start trying to figure out where to go, because we had so many things that we needed to figure out. And we should just go acclimatize on Link Sar. And that's what we did. We established that advanced base camp, and we went and we started trying to find our way. It took us like 3 weeks of like going up and down to try to figure out how to safely get through the few thousand feet of climbing kind of above our advanced base camp. You can see the meadow down there on the right. It was a lot of work. And it was pretty cool. I kind of loved it. I mean, there was a lot of kind of crappy climbing, and there was a lot of adventure and a lot of kind of banging our head against the wall. But eventually we did make it up to the kind of upper reaches of the mountain. And I thought I'd put this photo in just so you could see, like, part of the reason it's worth it to be out there is you turn around and you see this. This is Saltoro Congree. And so this place is just so beautiful and so rad. And eventually on this trip, we did make it up to 6,000 meters. So 1,000 meters shy of the summit. And it felt like we were pretty close. Turned out we actually still had a long way to go. But we decided, we got up 6,000 meters. Finally, we're acclimatized. We're like ready to rage. And then of course, at that point, the weather came in, and we spent weeks and weeks in base camp. You can see our nice bouldering mat here. Nobody broke their ankle, which is good. And at the very end of the trip, we finally had a weather window. This is after we've been in country for like 9 weeks, and we've got this little weather window that our forecaster was telling us about. And we went up, and this is the point where we turned around, just because the weather window never materialized. So we went home vowing to return. And so 2 years later, we came back. Why did we take a summer off? It's mostly my fault. I went out and got married, which was sweet. Continues to be sweet. Even during stay-at-home orders. I think it's just making things better, which is great. But in 2019, we returned to Link Sar. We got another permit. It was another whole series of hoops to jump through and a bunch of shenanigans. But we were able to return, and we were able to return with this guy. This is Mark Ritchie. So now there were 4 of us. Mark is also in his 60s, also hyper experienced, and he's somebody who is like very fit, very strong, very dialed. One of Steve's old partners created this balance of like old guys and new guys, or old guys and young guys, which is a little like is not really that traditional, but really I think was the only way that we were going to get up this mountain. So we flew to Skardu. We packed all our stuff. We took one last look at the gardens there, and we made that drive back in. Now you notice it's the same view as before, but the weather is very different. So we had actually showed up really early this year. This is kind of a funny tidbit, is that we heard there were Italians that were going to Link Sar, and we had to get there before them so that we could kind of establish where we wanted to go on the face. And I don't know, I think we were feeling kind of competitive about it, and we didn't want to get scooped. And like, who were these Italians that would come and try the same route that we wanted to do? Turned out that we got there really early, so we'd be there in front of these guys. And we got there in this very snowy season, but these guys ended up to be amazing. Many of them are now our good friends, and they were just going rock climbing, so it didn't matter. But this year we showed up, and there was a lot of snow in the range. We were hearing over and over again that it was the snowiest year on record. There's so much snow in the mountains. You have to be careful. And we were seeing things like this, which is this. The relief in this photograph is like probably 1,500 meters. This was a gigantic avalanche, and so we were in this space where like we really needed to be careful, and we really needed to let this mountain melt. Luckily, we had 3 months on this expedition, so we had time. We just kind of got to work, and something we knew that we wanted to do was put more time into our advanced base camp. And this is kind of funny, that nice field that you'll remember from 2017. This is the top of a cairn that is probably 1.5 meters tall, that is, covered in snow. So we had way more snow up there, and we thought we were going to show up there and like set up at these nice meadows, but it turned into this process of like digging out the meadows, building platforms. And it was like all of our friends were at home sport climbing. We were just digging holes in the ground, and we spent weeks doing this, but it's kind of what we needed to do in order to have a better place from which to acclimatize and be able to get at the upper mountain. So eventually we had hauled all this toilet paper up there. We'd done all this work. And this is kind of what I need to mention, that like, we is not the 4 of us Westerners. We is like the crew that we had pulled together, the 4 of us plus all of our Pakistani friends who, kind of as I alluded to before, Rasul is the guy in the upper left-hand corner who saw walking with Steve earlier. These guys are like family at this point. And these guys, like, going and hanging out with these guys is one of the best parts of these trips. And they were a huge part of our success, as they are on most expeditions like this. But eventually we had this sweet advanced base camp set up way up on the mountain. We're still in the grass and everything, but it really gave us the ability to get at the upper kind of real climbing. And there was still like 2,600 meters of climbing above us. So there's plenty of climbing to do. And eventually it was time to go and, get to work on this thing. And we actually were able to acclimatize to 6,000 meters, like pretty quickly once the snow started to melt. And at that point, of course, it started to storm. And I think that's something I want to talk about at this point in the show is that, we talk about these storms like it's this miserable time. Like it's, oh my God, we're stuck in these gorgeous mountains and we can't do anything. I actually like really love this time. Here I am playing chess with Mark. I spend a lot of time journaling, kind of working, like a lot of time to like work on all this stuff that I really don't have time for at home. Like longer kind of like life plans, thinking about what I want to do with my climbing, my career, my relationships, taking that time to be quiet, not have my phone blowing up all the time, not be like reaching for my pocket, like wondering if if somebody's commented on my Instagram post or whatever. You just get to like check out. And that is so valuable. And it's something that I really rely upon. So, when we have a few weeks of bad weather on these trips, it's oftentimes portrayed as like, oh, it's a miserable time, but it's like kind of beautiful. It's something that I've been trying to take that same attitude towards this whole COVID thing, just kind of as a side note. And it's a little harder when it's a global pandemic versus like, oh, you can't climb the giant hill you want to get up. But still, times when we have to like are forced to press the pause button are of course a huge pain in the ass, but do have a lot of value. So as we move on here, we also spend a lot of time staying fit. I love this picture of Steve with this rock. I think it's very cute. And we did a lot of bouldering. We did a lot of hangboarding. We were just making sure that we were keeping that edge nice and sharp so that when the weather cleared, we were ready. And eventually, after we'd been in country for about 2 months, that happened. And we got to go climbing. And the climbing on this thing was really good. The first couple of days of climbing were a lot of mixed terrain like this, like proper, good, hard mixed climbing. That really was really, really fun. Some of it was a little heads up, but for the most part, the gear was pretty good, and it was steep and hard and kind of all the things that we want. And we got up higher on the mountain, and you could see how high we're getting up here. Like if you look way down at the bottom, you can see the glacier way down below where base camp is, and you can see the snow, some of the meadows out there where advanced base camp is, and the climbing was delightful, and eventually we kind of got up in some more snow climbing, and this is our our third Bivouac route, and there is a lot I'm skipping here, which I could spin yarns on this stuff for the next 3 hours, so I'm not going to subject you to that. But the reason I love this photo is I feel like all four of us, and maybe some of you are this way as well. It's like when you were younger, maybe you are younger and this is what you want. Like it was like the radder, the better. And, oh man, I want to be sleeping on ledges where like a corner of the tent is like sticking over the edge. And it's funny with all of us on this trip, like we've done that plenty. And so when we got to this ledge where there was a lot of room, like you could, take off your harness and sleep without a harness on. And there was this big crevasse behind you that sheltered you from the rest of the mountain. And it was really safe. It was really nice. The other component to this was that this was moving into our fourth day en route at this point. And we knew that bad weather was coming. We knew that for this route in general, we were going to need like more than a week. And we knew that getting a week of good weather was pretty unlikely. And so we climbed up knowing that we were going to have about 36 hours of bad weather. And so we got to this spot, we hunkered down. You can see we like built some walls and stuff like that. And we knew that we were safe. And we just sat out about 36 hours of storms. Now we had the forecast that it was going to get better early in the morning on our, I guess, fifth or sixth day en route. And we started climbing and it looked like this. It was pretty awful. And so at that point, we like dug a snow hole and just sat there until it got better. And eventually it did. And it was a pretty interesting practice of like, okay, we're way up on this hill. Things aren't going right. What do we need to do? Let's dig a hole and sit in it until something changes. And then there we were climbing. And you could see this ice climbing above us was like top notch. Now, this ice climbing above us pretty quickly on this day turned into very challenging, steep, unconsolidated snow climbing, which is not as sweet nor as safe. So that really slowed us down, and we really started having to dig deep. We're also getting pretty high at this point. We're up. This day ended at right around 6,700 meters. So we're getting up there at this point, and things are getting challenging. But then finally, we launched on our last day en route, and it had some good climbing. This was some of the good stuff, and then it had a bunch of like pretty challenging snow climbing, digging through these cornices and stuff like this. And so we were like making pretty good progress. But at this point in the climb, something happened that I really am still not quite sure how to talk about. Like, we were operating really well up there and things were going great. Chris and I had led pretty much the entire route up to this point. And he had finished up his lead block for the day, for the morning at least, which really left me the summit block, which I was kind of fired up about. And so I charged out there to go get involved. And I climbed up around a corner, and I'm up digging through kind of steep snow, and snow kind of changed quality. It actually got better. I was able to stay on top, and things were going great. And then an avalanche released above me. It wasn't a particularly big avalanche. We were on skis. We were just kind of slipped out of it. But as it was, I was standing there moving quickly through like 60 degree snow. So like my tools weren't super well planted. It was very comfortable, but when you start having a bunch of snow moving over you, that kind of changes things pretty quickly. And it knocked me off my feet and sent me for like 100+ foot fall, like 30 or 40 meters or something like that, which is really not what you're looking for when you're at 6,900 meters on a, giant mountain face in the middle of a remote part of the Karakoram. And it was pretty awful. Now the amazing thing was that I walked away from it. I stopped, was hanging in space over an overhang, and did kind of full like self-inspection. The only thing I could find was I had lost a zipper pull on my pants. Thought that was probably going to be okay. And so I got back to the, I had to jug back up the rope and all that. And it took an age, but eventually I got back to my climbing partners, and they were totally willing to go down, which is pretty amazing. I mean, we put a lot of work into this thing, and I told them, listen guys, like, I think I need to be done leading, but I'm not hurt. If somebody wants to continue leading, I think we know what to avoid because we kind of know what's going on better with the snow now. And Chris took back over, which was pretty valiant because he had just, put in a huge block in that morning, and he continued leading, This is me, looking miserable. And the snow continued to deteriorate. The climbing was looking like this. And this is really not like when you think about like, oh, I'm going to the Karakoram to climb. This is not really what you want it to look like. This is not what you visualize. And it ended with us right near the summit. This is me. I'm dug into a hole. I am the belay, basically. Like, I'm like dead man, very much alive. So I'm like the alive man. And then Chris had cast off towards the top and had gotten into steep, unconsolidated snow that was just so steep and so unconsolidated that he just did not know what to do with it. And it was, very dangerous. And so he comes back down to the belay. We're having this discussion. It's like, what do we do? Do we, like, are we there? This might be a giant cornice. We might just be there. And I looked at Mark and I said, okay, Mark, like, you have all this experience climbing in Peru, climbing that really terrible fluted snow in Peru. And why don't you just go up there and like have a squidge, see what happens? And so Mark cast off and started like digging. This is the only photo I have of this, but it makes it look kind of mellow. But it was really steep and terrible. And I promise. And he spends like an hour like utilizing the S digging technique where you like dig sideways this way and then dig sideways this way, that he developed in like the 80s in Peru. And like an hour and a half later, made it to the summit. And at the same time, Steve had been digging into the mountain, looking for an anchor for us, and had found ice screws and built a V-thread. So it was pretty amazing that, we made it to the top of this hill. And while Chris and I led, pretty well the whole damn thing, this last like 20 meters that, if Chris and I had been up there, I think we would have turned around. I think we would have called it. But as it was, we got up to the top and it was amazing. And it was really a testament to the importance of not only like strength of youth, but also the experience and wisdom that comes with climbing for a long time. And that applies not only to that final pitch, but also just knowing how to get at this entire thing. And this guy Swenson, who had spent a lot of time trying this objective, pretty cool to be up there with him. Here I am. I was still pretty mentally mashed potatoes, but I was very excited to be there. And then I guess at that point I took over leading the rappels because Chris had been leading all day, and we rappelled for like 3 days. And I won't get into that. I'll just say that rappelling in soft snow takes forever, and there were some anchors that took like 4 hours to build, which was miserable. But we took our time. We got down safe. This is kind of down on the lower ramparts of the peak, and these are photos of us about like 10 minutes after we had gotten back to base camp, and you can see, our cheeks are still puffy from the altitude. Our skin is worked from the thin air and all the solar. We look pretty worked, but we're psyched. And it's like, it's a pretty amazing moment to be back in advanced base camp, to be safe. And with that, southeast face of Link Sar, we got it done, which was awesome. And once again, the four of us were the ones up there climbing, but the folks we work with there in this photo, we have Captain Mayor, who is our liaison officer, and then in the lower end we've got Fida Ali, who is Rasul's son. Rasul is on the right, and then Nadim, his son-in-law, and we literally could not do it without these guys. And that's really what I've got for you. That is, in many ways, the story of Link Sar. And thanks for listening to me spin yarns. I think I went way over time. Sorry, Jazz. But you guys up for some questions? Do we still have time for that?
Oh, totally. I think so. That was an awesome talk.
Cool.
You said before we got started, you're just going to play some slides as we kind of do the Q&A. So
yeah, let's throw these up. These will run for a minute, and while we yak, I think everybody's been looking at Zoom video enough. Maybe we can just, I don't know. If you want to just look at Jazz and I, tell us in the questions. We can turn
no one's telling us
garbage off. Jazz is pretty good looking. He's got a good mustache there.
Yeah, we're unintentionally matching this evening. Yeah, I mean, there we go. We'll go full match.
Oh yeah, nice.
Although I'm not sure I'm as practiced at pulling this off as you. These are awesome shots, by the way. It's cool.
Thanks.
And thanks for an awesome talk. So, question.
Thanks for having me. This is really special. I haven't been back down in New Zealand for a few years, and be able to speak to the community in NZ gets me real pumped.
Cool. Hey, so we've had a few come through, and I'm going to go through them kind of just in order that they came in, because that's easiest.
Great.
Ryan has a great question. He wants to know about like where you find your climbing objectives, unclimbed peaks and all that. Where do you get info?
Well, it's interesting. I spend a lot of time reading publications like the New Zealand Alpine Journal and the American Alpine Journal and the British Alpine Journal. And that tends to be a starting point. But the thing that I find, and if you look at my kind of whatever climbing career, you'll find that I kind of spend time in the same zones. Because I think that you kind of find inspiration to go somewhere. And oftentimes you come away from a trip having looked around and seen a bunch more stuff. And for me, that's kind of what it's been all about, is forming a relationship with space. And so going to, knowing that the south face of K6 was unclimbed, going to try that, and then kind of like finding out about Changi at the same time, going to do those. And then, then you come away with this like whole list of other things to do. And I'll tell you what, like there's no lack of things to do in Pakistan. And the next thing that I want to go try, which I'll keep quiet, but is something I saw on the last trip. And I've done the same thing in Alaska. I've done the same thing in Patagonia, in the Waddington, in New Zealand. It's just, thinking about this not just as like one trip to go try a thing. It's like one trip to go like discover a space and like come up with a whole bunch of objectives and then continue to return. And I think that as you form a relationship with a space, not only are you able to be more successful there, and are you able to really climb the things that are most inspirational to you, but also that space better, which means you can be more safe, which is a huge component of that.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, a testament to the power of like good long expeditions as well.
Yeah. And it's also like it kind of a testament to like the fact that climbing, like we talk about climbing as a sport, which I totally get, but I think of it more of as like a practice, which is, it is purely semantics, but thinking of it as something that, it's like not only like I'm going to go achieve, it's also like I'm going to go learn, I'm going to go become a better human. I'm going to go and experience far more than just like trying to get up this one thing. It's like make it kind of more holistic. Cool.
So someone called Rich Ed, I assume that's a pseudonym. Thanks, Rich. Sorry if I just offended you. He asks, if you could climb with one person that you've not climbed with yet that you look up to, who would it be?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. If I could climb with one person who I've never climbed with, I mean, it would have been Swanson. And now I've been on a bunch of expeditions with him. I don't know. Who would it be? I'm trying to think of like somebody from the past. Since we're on the NZAC, I've always been fascinated by Bill Denz. I think that guy was a total badass. And I mean, whether or not we got to go climbing together, I would have loved to have hung out with him.
All right. Now, Chris asks, how did you go about cutting your teeth, learning the skills when you came back to New Zealand? Did you like just go and do your own thing? Did you jump on a bunch of courses? Like, what was the strategy?
Yeah. Okay. So really good question. And so it's when I was in high school, I totally freaked my parents out. They didn't know the first thing about climbing, and they signed me up for a course when I was in high school. And that's kind of where I learned a lot of my like initial skills in climbing. And I spent a lot of time working on, like self-rescue skills and stuff like that too. And actually formed a partnership with the guy who taught that course. And he and I went and climbed a lot, and he and I actually have done a number of big trips to Alaska and things like that. His name is Mark Allen. But when it came to New Zealand, it was really interesting because I showed up and I had a lot of knowledge, but I hadn't put it into practice much. And I just went and like met people and tried things. And sometimes that went great. Sometimes it went just okay. And it's, at one point, a fellow named Mark Kendrick, who I'm still in touch with from time to time, but he was one of my main climbing partners in New Zealand and somebody who I really hold dear to my heart, is he was a British expat who was living in Australia, and he would come over and call me up when we'd go climbing, and he was really good. He dragged me up the south face of Cook. I think when we first met, he was running around Mount Cook Village, and he was like, "Oh, I want to go climb the south face of Cook. And do you want to go?" And I was like, I have no idea if I can do that. And eventually, when we went and made it to the top, and it was like this huge kind of mind expanding experience.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an awesome route. It's been on my list for too long. I'm gonna go and get it.
It's really good. It's really cool. But yeah, I think just being, part of it is going and trying, and part of it is being willing to fail or being willing to like not succeed, and being patient. And particularly the mountains of New Zealand, you got to be patient, because they'll kill you if you're not. But if you are, they'll teach you a lot.
Cool. Got a couple of gear related questions. There are always gear related questions in these.
Love the gear questions. Oh yeah.
What do you do about glasses? Are you a contacts man, or what do you do?
I wear contacts, and I have the contacts where I can wear them for. I think they say you can wear them for like 2 or 3 weeks. So they're the super air permeable ones. And so I just wear those a lot, and I always carry an extra one. I sometimes just wear my glasses in base camp when we're off the snow. But that's, it's interesting. It's something that seems like a crux, but is really just ends up not being a big deal. I mean, on this expedition, Chris wears glasses and Chris wears prescription sunglasses. Steve wears contacts, and I also wear contacts. It's really not, it's just one of those things. It's just another system you have to develop.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's answered Russell's question there. So Joseph asks, what kind of boots did you take? Link Sar, and what's the kind of trade-off, technical climbing versus warmth and all that? What are you looking for?
So let's see. On this trip, so full disclosure, I work as a Scarpa athlete, and that's, to be honest, it's because I think they're the best boots around. They don't give me so much that it's like I'm willing to say something I wouldn't want to otherwise. But they do set me up with boots, and so I'm wearing the Phantom 6000s on these trips, and I wear those boots a lot, and I find them to be a rather amazing blend between being nimble and technical, and also quite warm. And it's just there are a lot of examples of things where technology has made it so we don't have to make the hard choices that we used to. These days we're not talking about like, oh, do I climb with like one bent shaft and one straight shaft tool, and do I have my leashes? We're up there with like pretty aggressive tools without leashes on. We're wearing super air permeable, waterproof fabrics, and the boots are the same way. For sure. I mean, I can put on my, my like little comp boots up there, and they'd probably climb better, but it's, we're also not climbing like M11 out there. So, so that's what I wear. And I think the number one thing to say about boots is I tend towards things that are more warm, because me stressing about my feet will never help anything. And don't worry about brand, wear what fits.
Cool. Good advice. And sorry, that question wasn't from Joseph. Sorry, Joseph. That was, he says, however, that it's great material for a book, your story. He'd love to read it. Have you thought of writing a book?
I have thought about it. I've talked to somebody about it, actually. It sounds like a lot of work. let's say that it sounds awesome, but it will likely be a while.
Fair enough.
Maybe I just need an expedition where there's really bad weather, and then I'll just write a book.
So Gomez asks for more details about the S technique for climbing like bullshit snow on the summit, or wherever you encounter it.
That was some full black magic going on up there. I as far as I can tell, Mark would dig one way, and then it would give him something to push off of, and so he could kind of dig the other way. It's like
the zigzag kind of thing going on.
Yeah, kind of like this. Yeah. And it's really interesting. I mean, the only way to train for that kind of thing would be to like go try to climb the walls at the ski area parking lot after a fresh snowfall or something like that. Like it's just really hard, dangerous, miserable climbing. And to be honest, with all the steep, weird snow I've ever climbed, which has, for better or worse, been quite a bit, you just got to be patient. You just got to like just know that. I mean, sometimes you hear about people climbing that last pitch on Cerro Torre on the Ragni route before when nobody else has climbed it yet that season. It'll be like, oh, I started off the pitch as the sun was setting, and then I topped out as the sun was coming up. Sometimes it just takes forever, which is awful. But sometimes you just got to do it.
Funny, when you get to the top, it ends up being more like caving sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
2 questions about cameras. What's your camera of choice on a route like that? Is that cool?
All right, so let's see. Down low, I'm carrying kind of a full-sized mirrorless camera with full lens kit and all that. One of my favorite things to have in the mountains these days is a really long lens. Bringing like a 1200 to get these like really tight shots of these kind of like little parts of the mountain landscape. And then but then up higher on the route, when weight becomes a bigger consideration, I'm carrying one of the little Sony RX 100s. It's got a great sensor on it, and it's got a nice, like the glass is well built and it's wide enough that you can shoot your partner at the belay, but it actually gets quite long, so you can get some kind of cool long shots as well.
Yeah, it's my weapon of choice as well. It's a good one, actually.
It's great. Yeah, it's a great camera.
Yeah. I just dropped mine at the weekend though. It's pain in the ass. I'm gonna have to replace it.
You realize they're not cheap when you drop them.
No, but it's like, I don't know how many times it's done climbs where it's just been like on my front, bashing into the wall or whatever, and it doesn't owe me anything at this point.
Yeah, totally.
Continuing with the gear theme, Steve would like to know what, and this could be a how long's a piece of string question, so see where you go with this. But for Karakoram climbing, what's the key gear item that you think is most essential?
Interesting.
Yeah,
like something that is unique
to the Karakoram,
that range.
It's not like loperamide or something.
Yeah. Let's see.
There may not be a specific answer. Like,
it's interesting. How about this? How about we're climbing in the Karakoram during the summer, and that means that it actually gets quite hot, even up high, and that means sometimes you have to bivvy during the day. So a key piece of equipment is an eye cover.
Good one. Yeah, I guess probably important if you're like in Alaska or Antarctica or something as well. Good point.
Yeah, certainly the case. If you're in Alaska mid-season, Antarctica would be the same way.
Yeah.
Sleep is imperative.
Sweet. All right. Tom. Hamish would like to know. I'm screwing this up tonight. Hamish wants to know your favorite and least favorite climbs in New Zealand. You could go all night with that, eh?
Yeah, we probably could. I'm going to say the South Face of Hicks is one of the coolest walls I've ever been to. Cool. I don't know if I have a least favorite climb. Probably something that's like wicked polished, like right next to the road at Castle Hill. some of that stuff can be pretty demoralizing.
Yeah, all of a sudden you realize you can't actually levitate up glass, eh?
Yeah.
Dennis says this is the absolute best climbing presentation he's ever heard. So stoked. Nice one. And I saw as well someone said they're listening from Sweden. So
cool.
Cool.
What time is it in Sweden? I think it's the middle of the night there.
No, wouldn't it be like 6 a.m. or something?
Oh, maybe you're right, yeah.
But still, like, not a time that I would normally be watching. Maybe
early bird gets the climbing presentation.
Yeah,
way to be.
And while I've been talking, a couple more questions have come through. If you want to,
let's give it another couple minutes, and then
sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll just go with a couple more I've got in front of me. Gemma is pretty interested in emergency comms that you might have taken, because she says she had her Garmin InReach confiscated at an Indian airport, which sounds kind of annoying.
Yeah, and India is tricky, and I don't have any solutions there. I haven't climbed in India at all, but they're very very restrictive in terms of use of satellite technology within their mountainous regions. But that said, I carry a sat phone, and it's really interesting because at this point we all kind of have our own little devices. It used to be that there was like one device for the whole team, but at this point, I think on this trip we had 2 sat phones with us and 3 DeLormes, and which sounds ridiculous, but for 4 people, I guess it was I don't know. We each kind of had our little thing, and we each had the people we want to communicate with, and it's kind of nice when you don't have to share. And we're all trying to maintain relationships at home. So for my case, I carried a Iridium sat phone. Over there, you do get Thuraya reception for any sat phone geeks out there. Their geosynchronous satellites do offer service in Pakistan, which is really nice. But Iridium gives me a good deal. So that's what I use. But then we also do carry DeLormes, and it was really interesting. Actually, something on this trip that was kind of wild was we had texted the loved ones at home to let them know that we were on our way down, and actually somehow that got to the press, and it was being reported that we had sent Link Sar when we still had thousands of meters of rappelling to do. And it was just like, wow, we're not done yet. You're kind of jumping the gun on this one, amigos. But yeah, it's a different world out there these days. I mean, my first trip to Kyrgyzstan, which was actually with Paul Hersey, one of my dear pals down there, and Dunedin, and then our friend Eugene Tan. We didn't bring a sat phone. We went to Kyrgyzstan for like 2 months and just kind of dropped off the side of the earth and came back a little while later. And I kind of miss that sometimes. I mean, I love being in touch, but it's just such a deep release from everything. So, but that said, I do think that carrying some form of satellite technology and making sure that you have rescue procedures and insurance in place is imperative on these trips. Even less for you and more for your loved ones. I mean, I've just been involved with so many situations where, so-and-so went missing. We don't know where he is, and we haven't heard anything, and yada, yada. It's just the worst for everybody. And you don't want to have that influence on folks.
Yeah, no, good advice, I'd say.
With a positive note there.
Yeah. So this trip was supported by the NZAC's Expedition Fund, I understand, and Paul Knott, who convenes that fund.
Yeah,
he's come through with a question, which is probably a plug for the Expedition Fund itself.
Oh yeah.
Donate now at alpineclub.org.nz. He would like some tips on planning big expeditions in places where, maybe it's hard to get permits, how you deal with all that kind of thing. Do you get like an in-country logistics person, or does it kind of just go country by country? What's the deal?
Well, first off, Paul is really good at this kind of thing, and Paul is a major inspiration of mine and has been for a long time. So getting that question from Paul is, I don't know, makes me kind of chuffed. That's fun. But I think that certainly in Pakistan we have in-country assistance. And really you can't run a trip to the Karakoram without that.
Right.
And I think that it's really interesting. I think that a lot of these areas are different, but once again, it requires a longer, kind of lead up time to the expedition. These trips to Pakistan, you can't plan, weeks or months in advance. I'm planning a trip right now that's a year and a half out, and we're in the thick of it. And it takes a lot of time and energy and patience. And it takes a lot of reading the news and understanding what's going on in that part of the world, and kind of understanding what areas are closed and what might be opening and what might be closing down. But yeah, I do think that not only for getting permits and things like that, but also just getting real-time information, having contacts on the ground is imperative. And that's just another component to forming relationships with these spaces. So, if you wanted to go to the Karakoram, like maybe go somewhere a little easier to get at first. And then while you're there, form those relationships that allow you to effectively ask those questions about those areas that are more remote or harder to get at. And then you're halfway there. And, and on this last trip, we finished Link Sar, and then we actually went to another area and walked up another valley. And the trip was over, but Steve and I just kind of went exploring to see, what was up there. And just kind of took an extra week and a half to go putz around a little bit. And, we just basically
not just like a casual stroll up the next valley, like an actual week to.
Yeah. I mean, it just takes forever to get anywhere there. So yeah, I think it was only a few days of walking up there. I remember we were very tired as well. We were not going very quickly.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I guess that's how you find these rad objectives and kind of get the scoop on them. So
yeah. Relationship with space, man. The best place to see peaks is from other peaks.
Cool. Hey, thanks so much, Graham. You've stayed up till God knows what o'clock.
It's only 11:15 here. It's not that bad.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't sure if you were on I lost track of which time zone you're in. No. Daylight saving, so it's a little bit confusing here as well.
No. This isn't so bad. And I really, I if it were 3 a.m, I still would have stayed up for it. This is awesome. The New Zealand climbing community. I talked a lot about the New Zealand mountains, but the New Zealand climbing community is foundational for me as well. And the things that Kiwis have managed to go out and get done from those learnings that they've taken from, the Mount Cook Aoraki range and other areas are tremendous. And it's something that I think about a lot. And so to be able to present for the New Zealand Alpine Club is a big honor. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you for presenting to us. Apologies to the couple of you whose questions we won't get to tonight, but I believe you on every sort of, was it Saturday lunchtime-ish New Zealand time, you've been doing a bit of a Q&A on your...
let's see, it's 5 o'clock West Coast U.S. time, which I think that's... I'll screw this up, but I think that's Saturday at around lunchtime. I think that's right. It might actually just be noon, but I don't know. It's on Instagram. I'll put up a little timer, which makes it easier for everybody. But I've been just getting on there, and since I'm not traveling, and since most of us aren't traveling, it's just kind of a great time to check in and talk about beta or ideas, and just kind of it's like a Q&A / me just spinning yarns, and so yeah, come if you have questions or things bubble up, feel free to check in and ask away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Graham. It's been an outstanding presentation. As I've said, really appreciate it again. And I'm sure that there's, we've got, I can see 100 plus people, and normally what I see is a massive underestimate. So it can be 10 times that. I don't really know how it works. But anyway, there's some large number of people out there who are clapping for you. And I just want to say thanks once more. And congratulations on an awesome ascent.
Right. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
With that, we'll sign off from Graham, and we're just going to get to some reminders of announcements and things for Alpine Club events that are coming up, or some news that we have. So just a reminder and a bit of a recap from where we started the night. You'll be aware that with the shift to with the announcement of what a shift to COVID level 2 might look like. There'll be some changing advice around what outdoor activities are kosher. I know we're all chomping at the bit to get into the hills. And the Mountain Safety Council website, covid19outdoors.nz, has a kind of really excellent and helpful summary of what's kosher under our current level 3, and then that'll be updated as well to reflect what will come in hopefully as early as next week, but we don't know, for level 2. A reminder that last week's NZAC book special on avalanche awareness and backcountry skiing guidebook for a reduced price is expiring at midnight tonight, so you can get onto the alpineclub.org.nz website to purchase those books for the combined price of $56, save about $30. And this week's special book offer, from its relevance, I guess, for tonight's talk, is the Aoraki Taiputini guidebook at $45 this week, which is, again, $25 $30 off the RRP, and you can get that for just the next week. Also expires next Thursday. And you'll have seen in our intro video that we've got a special club night coming up next week. We'll be screening the film Pacific Lines, and that'll be followed by a Q&A with the star of the film, Angie Scarth-Johnson. And as with all of our club nights, that's going to be a free event, so pop that in your calendar for next Thursday, 8 p.m. And we'll have the trailer just coming up in a minute. So thanks to all of you who've tuned in this evening. Thanks again to Graham Zimmerman. And yeah, look forward to seeing you again for the next virtual club night next Thursday, and hopefully soon as well seeing you out in the hills. Thanks very much from me, Jazz Morris, signing off for this evening. Bye-bye.